This is the 1 year anniversary of my father, Stephen Rafferty's passing, otherwise known as Mr. Steve. And I just want to kind of make this video as a memorial to him and to tell you guys about him. So, my father was 20 years older than me, pretty much, well, not to the day, but within a month. He was in the Marine Corps when I was born. And interestingly, I was born on the Marine Corps birthday. And being that he was in the Marines, it kind of inspired me to eventually join the Marine Corps when I was older. Not only was he Marine, he was also an avid martial artist. And he started training when he was 16. And he was probably one of the best martial artists that I've seen, karate martial artists that I've ever seen. And I grew up watching him from an early age, watching him train. And this one particular story where he was hitting this thing called a makawab, which was like a 2x4 with rope wrapped around it. And I remember seeing him hitting this, and he did like a speed punch, and he snapped it in half. And I remember seeing that as a little kid, and that was pretty impressive. But I also took karate class from him growing up, and he used to teach it like he was a drill instructor, which later on helped me get through boot camp because I would take karate from him, and it was just like being in boot camp kind of. And there's one story where we were in karate class, and I think I was, I don't know, 14, 15 years. I was young. And he was teaching class, and there was like, I don't know, 20, 30 people in there. And I guess I was off looking out into the ozone layer somewhere, not paying attention. And, he yells at me and starts making me do push ups in front of the whole class. I think I had to do 50. And which was nice because he didn't take it easy on me because I was his son. And as I was growing up, he was strict, but he was fair. He wanted me to go to a Christian high school or a Christian school, which was good because the area we lived in kind of kept me out of trouble. He also really monitored who I hung out with and made sure that I didn't get myself in any trouble. So that was good because, when you're young and you're influenced, or, you might bow under peer pressure, you might do dumb things, and we all know that. But I was kind of more afraid of him and getting in trouble by him than I was like getting in trouble by the police, because it'd be like double duty. So, he was really hardcore, old school, real tough, thought of things in black and white, conservative, which I'm a conservative. And, growing up in the '80s is awesome. He would watch like all the '80s, war movies, Rambo, Commando. And I remember him, is always we're always watching that kind of stuff. And even when I was a little kid, and my brother Josh, who was, about 10 years younger than me, and he would let him watch all those movies, and I kind of like let my son watch all those movies, let my brother watch WWE. And we both trained karate and did all the sports. And he had a good sense of humor. We used to watch. He actually liked Beavis and Butthead. Believe that. And some of you guys might know Mr. Steve, like in when he was older. But he was funny, man. He watch Beavis and Butthead and sit there and laugh and laugh. And we used to watch this other show called The Young Ones, and had a great time watching that with him. If you've never seen that, go check it out on YouTube. It's a British comedy show. It's pretty funny. And then there was another show called Benny Hill, right? And I used to love that. We used to watch it together. And there was this old bald man in that movie, okay, or in that show. And Benny Hill used to do this thing where he'd run up to him and he goes smack him on the head like this, right? And so my dad was bald. He was balding and all that stuff, and which is where I get it from. And I remember I used to run up to him and smack him on the back of the head, and just like just like Benny Hill did to the old man. And he used to just say, "Yeah, son, yeah, just wait and see, right? Make fun of me now, wait and see." And sure enough, here I am, bald headed. What's even more funny? Got a glow there. What's even more funny is my own son, does the same thing to me, and makes fun of my bald head because he's got like hair down to here, but. you know, who knows if he's gonna have the same gene that I have, losing all my hair. But bald is beautiful, so, that happens, it happens. So fast forward, my dad did a lot of karate, used to always work out with his really good friend who was also my karate sensei, Bill George. And I remember when I was 16, those two would go on these 10, 15-mile runs or hikes with packs, and I used to think, man, this guy's a hardcore. And my dad was in his 30s at the time. And I just remember seeing him do that all the time. And I used to go running with him when I was 16. And he wasn't a fast runner, but he could run for a long time. And I remember I was faster, but I would go running with him. And I had my Mr. C starter kit is what he called it. And, I used to wear, that's back in the day when people wear all those necklaces. So I had about, three or four silver necklaces, and he used to go running with that. Can you believe that crap? And he used to make fun of me and call it a Mr. T starter kit. If you don't know who Mr. T is, go check him out. Fast forward, graduate high school, decided, well, I didn't graduate yet, but I decided that I was going to go talk to a Marine Corps recruiter. And my dad didn't want me to go into the Marines. He was Marine Corps infantry, and he knows how difficult that is, and probably thought there was a better path, than going to the Marines. And so one day, I decided I'm going to go talk to the recruiter, and I was old enough to make my own decision. And I come home, and he looked at me and goes, "You did it, didn't you?" I go, "Yeah." So I signed a contract to go in the Marines. I was in what was called the delayed entry program, so I was in it for like a year before I graduated. Just to show you how he was, I was in seventh grade, I was being really rebellious and ignorant and getting really bad grades, being lazy, all that kind of stuff. And I ended up failing. So the way my father was, instead of sending me to summer school, he's like, nah, screw that. You want to play around, then you're going to repeat the same grade. So I ended up repeating seventh grade, which kind of sucked, which caused me to go into the Marine Corps a little bit older. But anyway, made my own decision, signed up. He didn't like that too much, but then he kind of embraced it. Fast forward, go to boot camp. I was in boot camp during my birthday, graduated, and he was proud. And then we kind of developed like a real close bond at that time. And I remember the first time he took me out for my first drink after I got out of boot camp. Him and my sensei Bill George took me to this place, and I, ordered a gin and tonic. And I don't remember how many I drank, but I didn't drink going through high school. And I think I got drunk, but to this day, I can't stand gin and tonic. So first drink with him was pretty interesting. Anyway, but fast forward, I went to the Marines, got back from the Marines, went to college, became a corrections officer, then a police officer. And, he was having a little bit of issues, a little bit of trouble. And at that time, I was a police officer, and found out there was an opportunity to go do security overseas. And this is when there was, the Iraq War was kind of rumors of that thing was going to happen. So I found out an opportunity to go work in Kuwait to do force protection. And so, I started seeing him. He wasn't too happy with where he was at in life, where he was working. And he was always kind of, seemed like the person that would want to go work overseas, right? Not be stuck in, we were from Cincinnati. So he never got a chance to really do that, to kind of blossom in that way. So I kind of convinced him to go work overseas with me, and that's what we did. So I went over first, and then he ended up coming over later on. And man, he just had a great time. He had a great time working over in Kuwait with me. And this was during the buildup for the war, and when the war started, and and then we ended up, going through all of that drama, dealing with all that. And then we got an opportunity to go work in Iraq together. So not only did we work in Kuwait together, but we were roommates together. We used to drive to work together. We had our own car. all that stuff. So there was all kinds of things that, we did together. I remember getting off work in Kuwait. We'd work like 10 or 11 hours in the summer heat over there in Kuwait. And, you're talking about, 140, 150 degrees. And then, we'd have like black t-shirts underneath our tan uniforms. And we come back home at night. And he used to like getting Baskin and Robbins. Believe that? They have Baskin and Robbins in Kuwait. So we go get some Baskin and Robbins, and we get the Jamocha almond fudge. All right, he liked that. I like that. And I remember we'd take our top jacket off, and then we'd have that black t-shirt on. It would be nothing but ice. I mean, salt stains all over the place, like look like camouflage shirt. It was a black t-shirt, but camouflage with white salt stains. Okay, so I remember we used to do all that, and used to have so much fun driving around. Sometimes I played this loud rap music with him, and he'd just be bumping his head. And here he is, and he's like, he at that time he was my age now, 54, and I was 34 because I'm 20 years younger. And I remember just driving down Kuwait, we'd pump this music, and he was having a good old time, and so that was a lot of fun. We went into Iraq, worked together, had a lot of adventures. You guys hear me telling stories about him all the time. And, he was a character, man. Had this big old mustache. I call it the Saddam mustache because at that time, a lot of the males in Iraq would have these big, thick mustaches. So here he is, bald headed, thick mustache. And he used to love to do this thing in Iraq where the Iraqi custom would be you drink these little glasses of tea, chai, right? And they'd always put like sugar at the bottom of it. And you go in there, and that was like a custom. You go in there, they'd always serve you chai, one chai, and he carried around this coffee cup, right? Instead of him taking like a little glass of chai, he would just hand him this coffee cup, and they would laugh their butts off when he would give them this coffee cup, and they'd fill it up with the tea and put a whole bunch of sugar in there, and that was pretty funny. And he loved his coffee black, right? And another thing he did too was he liked to eat spicy foods. He was a foodie like me. And I remember when he would eat spicy foods, he would just sweat profusely, right? All over the place. I don't do that, but he sweats profusely. And it's hilarious. And I got this other story to tell you really quick about going back a few years before that. We went to a buffet, like a Chinese buffet. Him, me, my sensei, Bill George, and then probably a couple other people from the high school. We decided to go to this buffet, and him and Bill George, man, Sensei George, they got a whole plate full of this shrimp cocktails, right? And I remember them sitting there eating. There was a pile of shells like this, and they're sitting there. I don't know how long. Nowadays, I think they put a cap on how long you can stay and how much you can eat these buffets, because boy, those guys tore it up. And I remember another time when I was also in high school, we went whitewater rafting together. And it was myself, my dad, and this guy from church named Donnie Sneed, and there was only 3 of us in this raft. There were supposed to be 4, okay, and we had our helmets on, and we're in West Virginia, and we hit these rapids, right? And at certain points of the river, they'd take your picture. So we're doing, we're hitting these rapids, and, we hit this thing, and the boat did one of these numbers, right? And I remember and they took the picture right at that moment, and my dad flies out of the boat's like this. I'm standing there looking at my dad who just fell in the water, and Donnie C's doing the same thing. I got my mouth open, and they took that picture right at the same time, and it just happened to have my dad's foot sticking up out of the water. Nothing else, just me and Donnie Sneed looking at my dad that just flew in the water. And I remember we kept that picture for a long time. I don't remember where I wish he still had it. It was like proud of. He had his the only thing you saw him was his foot. So that was hilarious. Like I said, he had a pretty good sense of humor. Fast forward back again, working in Iraq together, doing all kinds of stuff. It was a lot of fun. And then, just over the years, we did a father and son thing. We kind of separated. I ended up, moving to another part of Ohio, and then we ended up starting a business together. We taught martial arts together for a little bit, and then kind of did do very well. That was around 2008 timeframe. I had to go back and work overseas, and my grandmother died, his mother died, and I kind of put him in a state of depression. So we kind of separated. I went back overseas to work. and then I ended up moving to Virginia, and he stayed in Ohio. And it was kind of like that relationship back and forth for a long time, and he ended up living with us for a little bit, and then moved back out, and then he kind of got sick right around COVID started happening, and he lost a ton of weight. If you ever see my dad, well, you see pictures of him on this video, but he was kind of a hefty guy, you know. He was overweight a little bit, and one day he sent me this picture, and he was like, looked like a concentration camp victim. You know, he was skin and bones, and it shocked me, right? And then I got a call from he was living out in Nevada and like in a senior kind of community. And right around that time when he sent me that picture, I get a call from the people he managed the thing, and they said that he was kind of acting erratic, and they were nervous, and they called the police. And anyway, they thought he had a mental health breakdown, and they ended up taking him to the hospital, and they put him like in a psychological observation. And I found out, and I thought he was, you know, in the hospital because he was sick and maybe possibly dying. So I flew to Nevada to check him out, and come to find out, it wasn't because he had a mental health issue. What had happened was, you know, he was older at the time, in his late 60s, and he was dehydrated, and he wasn't eating right. So the dehydration caused him to act out like that, you know. So it wasn't he didn't have a mental health problem, and you know they ran all these tests and everything. And I remember I went to go see him at the hospital, and for the first time I've seen him in a couple years, and especially I haven't seen him when he was lost all that weight. And it was kind of like, you know, you go in there and you see him, and it was just like this man that you looked up to your whole life. It's a very powerful figure, is bigger than life and intimidating, and he was skin and bones, you know. And you know, I broke down, and anyway, I hugged him and stayed there for a few days, and then I went back to Virginia. And then fast forward a little bit later on, COVID was getting ready to break down, and I was living on a military installation because my wife's active duty army. And you know, my wife suggested, you know, why don't we have your father come live with us? And that's what we did. And I think because we brought him up there to live with us, you know, he possibly could have died during COVID because he was by himself, and already wasn't in good health. And so we brought him up, and I was on his butt all the time and getting him to work out and all this other stuff. And he did. He was doing a good job recovering. And and then we ended up moving, and he had to move to another place by himself. And then he just got sicker and sicker, and you know, he had diabetes, so he ended up getting to a point where he ended up getting both of his legs amputated, and that was pretty rough. And um, you know, depression is a beast. You know, he was in depression for several years and never really got out of it. His health just got worse and worse, and you know, it's just depression is evil. You know, it's like a dark cloud over you. It's like it consumes you, and it's very, very hard to get out of it. I know for myself that, you know, there's been times when I've been depressed too, and it's very, very hard to get out of that depression, you know. And he he just slipped, and he got sicker. And I'm getting ready to end this here soon, but he uh he was in a nursing home. I couldn't take care of him where I was at, but I was close by, so I would see him all the time. And I was working out of town, and I was coming back. This is outside of DC, and I get a call from the nursing home, and they said that the paramedics were there, and they were performing CPR on him. And this was January 29th, 2025. And I was like, okay, you know, I'm only about 10 minutes away. I'm on my way. And the crazy thing is, I showed up in there, the paramedics were still there. They were performing CPR on him. And I saw my dad laying there. looking up into the sky, you know, and he was on the floor, I guess, because they took him off the bed and they were doing CPR. And I looked on the TV, and it was right at the same time when that plane crash in DC hit the helicopter, and it killed everybody on the plane and as well as the helicopter. So he passed away right around the same time that happened. And they spent, I think, a good 20 to 30 minutes working on him, which was pretty outstanding considering he was, already in the 70s and already in nursing home. So you would have thought that, he couldn't take that. And they just kept it up, trying to save him. And, he taught me strength. He was very strong. He was resilient. He didn't give up. Yes, he was in depression, but he didn't give up. He could have taken his life at any time, but he never did. He still pushed through. He endured a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and he just kept it up. And he loved me. He loved my brother Josh. He loved my son Ian and my daughter Laura. He loved my wife, and and he was a good dad, and he just wanted me to be the best that I could be, and I hope I made him proud. But I just kind of wanted to make this video of him and tell you guys a little bit about Mr. Steve, and I'm going to tell more stories about him specifically. Um, and he was a great man, one of a kind, one of a kind. Nobody else like him. Outstanding martial artist. Hits very hard, super fast. He might have been overweight, but man, his hand speed was so fast, and he was just amazing. And can't ever take that away from him. And he mastered that martial art. He was a great public speaker, um, great salesman, great talker, very articulate, very smart. And so I'm proud that that he's my dad. So I wanted to just tell you guys about him a little bit. And and he's also a Christian, and made sure I went to church and everything like that. I can't thank him enough for that. You know, he also won me to Jesus when I was a teenager. Like I said, he kept me out of trouble, kept me in line, and thankfully, because who knows where I would have been. I never even been arrested, didn't get into drugs, didn't do all that. And it's all because of him. And so I just want to tell you guys a little story about him. And for you guys that know him, know Stephen Rafferty or Mr. Steve in parts around the world, great man. And anyway, I know it's a long video, but I hope you enjoyed it. Take care, stay safe.